Story 1: The Face in the Mirror. If you are the kind of person who likes to stare into your own eyes in the bathroom mirror at night, please, just stop. I did it for 3 minutes on a Tuesday night because I was bored, and now I haven't looked at a reflection in over a year. I am too afraid of who might be looking back. I had just moved into a studio apartment in an old converted textile mill in Scranton, Pennsylvania. It was one of those places with high ceilings, exposed brick, and a history that the landlord, a guy named Mr. Gable, was very vague about. I was working double shifts at a local warehouse to keep up with the rent, so I was usually coming home around 3 a.m., exhausted and high on caffeine. The apartment came partially furnished, including a massive floor-to-ceiling mirror in the bedroom. It was beautiful, with a heavy wooden frame carved with what looked like vines and small, distorted faces. I thought it was a steal. The first few nights were normal. I would get home, throw my keys on the counter, brush my teeth, and fall into bed. But about 2 weeks in, I noticed something. I was standing in front of the mirror, unbuttoning my work shirt, when I felt a weird sensation of being watched. I looked at my reflection. It looked like me. Same tired eyes, same messy hair. But as I turned away to grab my pajamas, I saw, just for a millisecond, my reflection's head stayed perfectly still, staring at my back. I spun around. My reflection was back to normal, mimicking my surprised expression. I laughed it off. I was sleep-deprived. The brain does weird things when you're running on 4 hours of sleep and cheap energy drinks. A few nights later, the lag got worse. I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom, which had a smaller, matching mirror. I spat into the sink and looked up. My reflection didn't look up with me. It stayed bent over the sink for a full second before slowly, very slowly, raising its head to meet my gaze. Its eyes weren't just tired anymore. They looked hungry. I stopped using that bathroom at night. I told myself it was some weird optical illusion caused by the flickering fluorescent lights in the hallway. I even called Mr. Gable, complaining about the lighting. He just grunted over the phone and said, "Don't look too hard at things you don't want to see, Tyler." Then he hung up. The curiosity eventually outweighed the fear. You know how it is. You want to prove you aren't crazy. I remembered reading about the Troxler effect online, how staring at your face in low light can make it distort and look like a monster. I decided to face it. At 3:30 a.m., I stood in front of the big bedroom mirror. I turned off the overhead light and lit a single candle on the nightstand. The room was bathed in a flickering orange glow. I set my phone timer for 3 minutes and stared directly into my own eyes. 1 minute in, my face started to blur. My nose seemed to disappear, and my skin looked like it was melting. I knew this was just my brain getting bored, so I pushed through. 2 minutes in, the air in the room grew freezing. I could see my breath in the mirror, a faint white mist, but the reflection of the room didn't show any mist. My reflection wasn't breathing at all. It was standing perfectly still, its hands at its sides, while my real hands were shaking. That's when I saw it. In the background of the reflection, my closet door was open. In my real room, I knew it was closed. I had locked it before starting this. Inside the reflected closet, I could see a pair of pale, thin legs dangling from the top shelf. I wanted to look behind me, but I couldn't move. My eyes were locked onto the reflection's eyes. My reflection began to smile. It wasn't my smile. It was too wide, showing too many teeth, and the corners of the mouth stretched up toward its ears. It reached out, not toward me, but toward the glass. Its fingers pressed against the surface from the other side. I heard a sound that I will never forget, a soft, rhythmic scratching, like someone was trying to dig their way through a thin sheet of ice. "Almost there," the reflection whispered. The voice didn't come from the room. It came from inside my own head. The timer on my phone went off. The shrill beeping broke the trance. I scrambled backward, tripping over my laundry basket and crashing into the wall. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. The room was empty. The closet door was shut and locked. I looked at the mirror. It was just a normal mirror again. But there, right at chest level, were 5 distinct greasy smudge marks on the glass. They were on the inside. I didn't stay another minute. I grabbed my phone, my wallet, and my car keys and ran out of that building in my boxers and a t-shirt. I drove to a 24-hour diner and sat there until the sun came up, shaking so hard I couldn't hold my coffee cup. I went back the next day with 2 of my friends, Jason and Megan, to get my stuff. I refused to go into the bedroom alone. When we walked in, the mirror was gone. There was just a bare patch on the wall where it had been hanging. Mr. Gable claimed he didn't know what I was talking about. He said the apartment never had a mirror in the bedroom. He even showed me the inventory list. It wasn't there. But when Jason walked over to the spot where the mirror had been, he pointed at the floor. There in the carpet were 4 deep indentations where a heavy wooden frame had sat for a very long time. And on the wall, there was a small, circular hole drilled into the brick. I found out later from a neighbor that the guy who lived there before me didn't move back home. He vanished. The police found his apartment completely empty, except for a pile of broken glass in the middle of the bedroom floor and a note on the nightstand that just said, "He won't let me back out." I live in a new place now. It's a modern building with no character and no history. I've covered the bathroom mirror with a towel. I shave by touch, because sometimes when I'm walking past a darkened window at night, I see a flash of a smile that isn't mine, and I know that the person in the mirror is still waiting for his turn to come back. Story 2, the closet voice. If you have a walk-in closet in your bedroom, do yourself a favor and keep the door locked at night. Seriously, put a chair under the knob if you have to, because once you hear what I heard coming from the dark behind those clothes, you'll never feel safe in your own room again. It started about 2 months after I moved into the bottom half of a rundown duplex out in the suburbs. The price was right, and I worked the second shift at a distribution center, so I really just needed a place to crash during the day and watch TV at night. My landlord, an anxious guy named Mr. Henderson, who always smelled like nervous sweat and cigarettes, swore the upstairs unit had been empty for 6 months. The apartment was okay, mostly just old, but the bedroom had this massive walk-in closet that felt totally out of place. It went way too far back, past the hanging rods, into a weird, unfinished alcove where the drywall felt damp. The first few weeks were fine, just normal old house noises, pipes banging, floorboards settling, but then the whispering started. I usually got home around 2 a.m., totally wired from work. I'd be lying in bed, scrolling on my phone in the dead silence, and I'd hear it. Scritch, scritch, pause, scritch. At first, I thought it was mice inside the wall, gross but manageable. I banged on the wall near the closet door and the noise stopped immediately. I felt tough, problem solved. 2 nights later, it wasn't scratching. I woke up around 4 a.m., paralyzed by that heavy feeling in your gut that tells you something is terribly wrong. The room was dead silent. Then, from deep inside the closet, a voice whispered. It sounded wet, like someone trying to talk with a mouth full of saliva. He's awake now. My blood ran cold. I lay there for an hour, staring at the closed closet door, terrified that the handle would start to turn. I convinced myself I was dreaming, just sleep paralysis or something. The next day, I bought a heavy-duty slide bolt and installed it on the outside of the closet door. It made me feel a little better. If something was in there, it was staying in there. For a week, silence. Then it got worse, so much worse. I was on the phone with my mom one evening, just catching up. I was laughing at something she said, and I hung up. Immediately, from behind the locked closet door, I heard a perfect imitation of my own laugh. It wasn't an echo. It was delayed by 3 seconds, and it sounded practiced. Haha, yeah, Mom, that's crazy, the voice whispered. It was my voice, but flatter, dead. I grabbed a baseball bat I kept under the bed. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I crept toward the closet door. The slide bolt was still engaged. "Who's in there?" I yelled, trying to sound intimidating, but my voice cracked. "Silence." Then the voice came back, quieter this time, right up against the wood of the door. "Who's in there?" it mimicked. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on. I called Mr. Henderson the next morning and told him I thought someone was squatting in the empty, upstairs unit and somehow getting into my walls. He blew me off, said I was hearing the pipes. Last night I decided to end it. I waited until 3 a.m. The house was silent. I grabbed a flashlight in one hand and the bat in the other. I slid the bolt back, clack, and ripped the closet door open. The beam of light hit the back wall. Nothing, just my hanging shirts and coats. I stepped inside, pushing past the clothes to that weird, unfinished alcove in the back. The air smelled foul back there, like unwashed hair and rotting food. I shined the light on the back wall. The drywall didn't look right. There was a seam running vertically that had been poorly taped over and painted. I pressed on the wall. A huge section of drywall swung inward like a hidden door. It wasn't a wall. It was access to a service crawl space that ran between the upstairs and downstairs units. I crawled through the opening. It opened up into a small, hidden room packed with insulation. There was a filthy sleeping bag on the floor, dozens of empty food wrappers, and jugs filled with yellowish liquid. But the scariest thing wasn't the mess. It was what was taped to the wall. There were dozens of photos, Polaroid photos. They were taken through cracks in the floorboards of the upstairs unit, looking down into my apartment. Photos of me sleeping, photos of me eating dinner. And in the center of the wall was a notebook. I opened it. It was a script. Page after page of things I had said in the last 2 months. Phone conversations transcribed word for word. Things I yelled at the TV. And next to each line there were check marks, like someone was practicing them. They weren't haunting me, they were studying me. I heard a floorboard creak directly above my head, in the empty, upstairs unit, then heavy footsteps running towards the back door. I didn't even pack. I grabbed my keys and drove to a motel 2 towns over. The cops found the hidden room, but whoever was living in the walls was gone. I live in a modern apartment building now, 4th floor, concrete walls, but sometimes when it gets really quiet late at night, I catch myself staring at my own reflection in the window, wondering if the voice I use really sounds like mine anymore. Story 3, The Shadow in the Hallway. I never used to be afraid of the dark. I was the guy who could walk through a graveyard at midnight or stay in a supposedly haunted hotel and sleep like a baby. But after what happened in that house in Cicero, Illinois, I can't even have a closet door cracked open. If you live in one of those old ranch-style houses with a long, central hallway, do me a favor. Tonight, before you go to bed, turn off the lights and stand at one end of that hall for 30 seconds. If the shadows at the far end seem just a little too thick, don't wait around to see if they move. I moved into that house about 6 months ago. I'm 24, and I work the late-night security shift at a medical supply warehouse. It's boring work, mostly just watching monitors and drinking lukewarm coffee, but it pays the bills. Because of my schedule, I'd usually get home around 4 a.m., when the rest of the world was still dead to the world. The house was a rental, a bit dated with beige carpets and wood-paneled walls, but it had a great price. The only thing I didn't like was the hallway. It was narrow and ran about 20 feet from the living room to the 2 bedrooms at the back. There were no windows in that hall, so even in the middle of the day, it was pretty dim. The first week was normal. Then, on a Tuesday morning, I walked in from my shift, tossed my keys on the kitchen counter, and headed toward my bedroom. As I reached the mouth of the hallway, I stopped. At the very end, right outside my bedroom door, there was a shape. It was a dark, vertical mass that looked slightly darker than the shadows around it. I figured it was just my eyes playing tricks on me because I was exhausted. I rubbed my eyes, blinked a few times and it was gone. I told myself it was just a floaty in my eye or a trick of the low light reflecting off the wood paneling. I went to bed and forgot about it. 3 days later, it happened again. This time, the shape wasn't at the end of the hall. It was halfway down, standing right next to the bathroom door. It looked like a person, or at least the silhouette of one, but it was completely featureless. No eyes, no clothes, just a void of matte black. I froze. My heart started thumping against my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears. I reached over and flipped the hallway light switch. The overhead bulbs flickered on, filling the space with yellow light. The hallway was empty. I checked the bathroom, empty. I checked my bedroom and the spare room, locked and empty. I felt like an idiot. I started rationalizing it, thinking maybe I was developing some kind of sleep deprivation psychosis. I even Googled it. Turns out seeing shadow people is a common side effect of chronic exhaustion. I felt relieved. It wasn't a ghost, I just needed more sleep. I invited my friend Megan over that weekend for a movie night. We were sitting on the couch eating pizza around 11 p.m. I hadn't told her about the hallway because I didn't want to sound like a lunatic. Suddenly, Megan stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes were fixed on the hallway behind me. "Jason," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Who is that?" I felt a cold chill wash over me. I turned around. There it was. The shadow was leaning out from the hallway entrance, just its head and shoulder visible. It looked like it was peeking at us. Before I could even breathe, it ducked back into the darkness of the hall. I grabbed a heavy maglite from the kitchen drawer and ran toward the hall, screaming for whoever it was to get out. Megan was right behind me, clutching her phone, ready to call 911. I swept the light down the hallway. Nothing. We checked every inch of that house. We looked under the beds, in the closets, even in the crawl space access in the pantry. Every door and window was locked from the inside. Megan didn't stay the night. She left, and I don't blame her. She saw it too. That meant it wasn't just in my head. I couldn't afford to move out yet, so I bought a couple of those cheap, motion-activated security cameras. I set one up in the living room facing the hall and one inside my bedroom. The next morning, I checked the footage. On the living room camera at 3:12 a.m., I saw the hallway shadows begin to distort. A black shape slowly detached itself from the wall and stood in the middle of the hall. It stayed there for an hour, just standing perfectly still, facing my bedroom door. But here's the thing, the motion sensor never tripped. The camera only caught it because I had it set to continuous record. It was like the thing had no mass, no heat, nothing for a sensor to detect. The escalation happened 2 nights ago. I was in bed trying to sleep when I heard a sound. It wasn't a scratch or a bang. It was the sound of a zipper, a long, slow zip coming from right inside my bedroom. I lunged for my bedside lamp. In the sudden burst of light, I saw the shadow. It wasn't at the end of the hall. It was standing at the foot of my bed. I didn't scream, I just reacted. I threw my heavy alarm clock at it and lunged forward. My hands didn't pass through air. They hit something solid, something that felt like cold, slick plastic. The shadow let out a very human grunt and shoved me back. As I fell, I saw it scramble toward the hallway. I didn't let it go. I tackled it in the dark hall, and we crashed into the wood-paneled wall. The paneling gave way with a loud crack, and we both tumbled into a space I didn't know existed. I scrambled away and shined my phone light. It wasn't a ghost. It was a man. He was wearing a full-body suit made of a material so black it looked like it absorbed the light, something like Vantablack fabric. He had been living in a narrow, 3-foot-wide gap between the hallway wall and the exterior of the house. But that wasn't the twist. The police arrived and pulled him out. He was a guy in his 50s, totally silent. When they searched the hidden crawl space, they found a small chair, a tablet, and a series of high-end fiber-optic cameras that were fed through tiny, pin-sized holes in the wood paneling. The lead officer called me over, his face pale. He showed me the tablet. It wasn't just showing my house. There were split screens. I saw my neighbor's kitchen. I saw the bedroom of the girl who lived 3 houses down. I saw a dozen different hallways from a dozen different houses in my neighborhood. The man wasn't just a stalker. He was part of his service. On the tablet, there was an open chat room with hundreds of active users. They were paying him to stand in people's hallways. They were betting on how long it would take for the owners to notice the shadows. I moved out the next morning. I'm in a high-rise apartment now with solid concrete walls. But last night, I was walking to the kitchen for a glass of water. I glanced down the short entryway hall. The light from the street was hitting the wall just right, but there was a corner near the door that stayed dark. I watched it for a second. I swear the darkness blinks. So if you see a shadow in your peripheral vision tonight, don't just blame it on being tired. Someone might be getting paid to watch you find it.